I live in a neck of the Android zone where the Lacklusters was able to make plain that they don't necessarily feel gigged down with the idea, the notion that tribute to comparison to the Kennedys is a tribute to be desired. You made this clear to me by Murder and Circe after I compared Johnny Chin, another noble individual, to his martyrdom. It was as if to say that Kennedys were killed in defense of what they stood for. And because I believe in police work and that everybody is entitled to an honest case, whether it's Donnie Chin, Circe Kennedy, or Mackenzie Shirilla, I noted this logos, this theme, as evidence in who killed Donnie Chin. Now, I say that because it is indeed an indignity of sorts, given what is going on in Gaza and Palestine on the 60th year since November 22nd, 1963, when John Kennedy was assassinated. But John Kennedy is entitled to an investigation. As President of the United States, he stood for certain things. He's entitled to recognition. You might think it's strange that I would talk about the two of them at the same time, but they're both clear and present. What's happening in Gaza is the extinction of everything that the Kennedys, that all human beings in the democratic world stand for. And Robert Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr., who is the most talented politician in the field at present, has gravely insulted the intelligence of the human race by depicting the Israeli traitors as democracy, despite their own admission that they're at war with the United States in secret and seeking to humiliate us and doing a very good job of it. So, my point of departure is, to me, correct, but I'd like to discuss the issue of critique, because there's quite a lot involved in what it takes to go into the matters that we consider to be necessary to go into as a matter of learning and influence in our social causes. There's an old word, aporia, which, if you know it, which you probably don't, is generally used to convey confusion or outseenness. There's a book called the Oxford English Dictionary, which is abbreviated OED. If you want to follow up on this and you go into a library, even a public library, and ask for the OED, they know what the Oxford English Dictionary is. Its source is in history, the origins of words, first uses, second uses, and follows the change of the word. Aporia meant a feeling of uncertainty, where to begin in a complex issue, not because you don't know what has to be said, but because you can start from anywhere, any angle. You know, the problem with know-it-alls is that they give the impression of having safe crack to the simplicities of slogans. But people who know complex subjects understand that things can slip from your mind. The critique involves many complex issues that are like a Chinese box with hidden drawers. Even Freudian slips don't always mean what they seem to. So it can be very difficult if you're experienced in forgetting something important that you wanted to say. And finding the right place to begin. Especially when you're dealing with an opposition that seeks to be dismissive of you on the basis of their fascination with and manipulation and control of the appearance of things. They would dismiss as a kind of wiseacring efforts to inform people and challenge beliefs based on learning. John Kennedy worked very hard and is entitled to common decency. However, so are the people of Gaza. Using Kennedy's name to address the situation that exists on the anniversary of his martyrdom may seem very foolish, that it's only going to torture the people who you wish to try to give courage to. I understand this. And it may be so. All the same, I believe that Kennedy would have put a stop to what Israel is doing. He wouldn't have allowed Israel's power base to grow to such a degree and their noise to rise to such decibels that they could spite us even if we said no. I believe the Israelis' threats and railings against the United States, which are both covert and overt, mandate that we bring our fleet home. Biden bears no comparison in understanding to Dwight Eisenhower, who immediately rallied from a hospital bed to put a stop to Britain and Israel when they exploited his infirmity to raid the Suez Canal. Kennedy was a man who couldn't comprehend, couldn't conceive of an executive branch that was out to subvert and destroy the United States of America. Biden comes after the horrifying ordeal of Kennedy's assassins holding power, the insane criminals in the Bush administration and Hitler-Reagan. And it's as a result of this, there's no way to solve the problem of Kennedy's assassination in present-day politics that encourage Biden. And to a great degree, I think that his nephew, Robert Kennedy, has a stakeholder system that embraces the idea that Kennedy died for what he stood for. In other words, it was more or less palace-friendly fire. I propose to address some of the questions that arise as to what all of this means. I think we all realize that at root, it has to do with the privileged and their attitude towards overcrowding as they see it. Frantz Fanon's idea of the wretched of the earth, working with and for the masses. Gaza was a showcase for human intelligence, sensibilities, education, human dignity, human rights, compassion, cultural difference, beauty, love of children, love of family, and it is being demolished in hostility for the idea that such a circumstance can prosper in circumstances of relative poverty and overcrowding. That's a challenge to the notions of the privileged. I think we all realize that at root, that is what is going on. It comes from Star Trek's whimsical presentation in an episode called The Trouble with Tribbles. Trouble with tribbles is that they overpopulate. And this idea of overcrowding has come to be a common cause among the mercenaries of the privileged class. I think we all realize that that is something that at least Robert Kennedy is also reacting against. The idea that education and medical care can make even poor materially lives worth living. And of course, we're dealing with people in the authority system who want to come down with the iron hammer of the hardest interpretations of the law against young people who are doing nothing more than trying to save the planet from the oil barons. So we're dealing with complex mortal casebooks for a violation of human decency by those in power. And clearly they made it. We see that from AIDS, from COVID, from the genocide in Palestine. We see it from the arbitrary arrests of people living as good citizens, model citizens even, in the Russian Federation. We see it from the inability to come to grips with what Fauci and Louis Kahn have done, what Bill Gates is doing, by the inability to understand that Noam Chomsky and Donald Trump brainstorms the limitations of free speech, working together on catastrophe management. The point of a library association is not to persuade, but to preserve. We're dealing with a movement in America that de-persuades the idea that preserving points of view is necessary for a balanced judgment about what is going on. We might end up, in fact, with arbitrary arrests in the United States of America. The cruelty that Jay Inslee has visited on me, personally, is notorious. Now, Spike Goldley, Columbia's darling, wanted a picture on the wall of Sal's. There's this idea that if you vote for a black man, you're helping the black race, no matter who that black man is, no matter what he stands for. So they made it into a sort of pimpogram where the black man got hold of Midori, who, whether in reality or not, demonstrated Trumpy Toon's notion that the person who has the power controls the nature of reality, rather than the ethical spirit of the human race's desire to love and preserve what is right and what is good. It's typical of Pope Carl to monger something along the lines of, people died to protect your right to freedom of speech. Why shouldn't we make a game out of killing you to preserve your freedom of speech? I think at the root of this has to do with the fact that if you look at Jesus Christian culture, gangsters in the city of Pittsburgh, on the streets, the pimps, the child molesters, and Yoko Ono, you get a fairly good definition of Zionism. When you look at the situation with the way that the pirates have encouraged piracy by men like John Schulman, you see that this is no idle denigration of people who have made common cause in gangsterism and covered it with religion and then threatened you as being irreligious if you question that bent. This was a mainstream power that was brokered by the executive under Hitler-Reagan. I say Hitler-Reagan because it's very clear that the way that the Kennedy assassination operated was intended to defeat him by making it too dreadful to talk about what was really done to him. And that's not a lesson I intend to learn. I think it's important to describe the evidence that it was a colossus from Access Hollywood and a snuff film job, so that we know what we are dealing with, so that the people who made him a school bus martyr know that we know. So the idea that martyrdom outcome is mandated is quite alien to the American project. What we see, however, is a failure to trace the themes of the ideas of the assassins and madmen behind it. Schulman, for example, published a small book of his own about mayors in plague time, as I tried to disentangle myself from Robert Fripp's notorious partnership with the Myrons and the Zionists of Pittsburgh, who had tortured me for them as a child. This attempt to disentangle myself from them came as I, like JFK, was being characterized as a philanderer, and that it was a question of character. And Joel Kaplan played the role of the Carousel Club collection officer working for Paul McCartney. This sinister moment in public relations in the history books of the city of Pittsburgh is the time when Schulman chose to publish something about mayors in plague time. And his partner, Justin Vicari, wrote a long poem called Bad Blood. This is the sort of thing that makes Ringo Starr so ogreous, horrifying, and infamous to the mind to contemplate. they came to normalize and create a status culture around the victimization of the AIDS attack, that the bogey monster, someone who was simply investigating and tried to get to the bottom of it. And Clint Eastwood, evidently, long way back, came up with the idea of executing me with medical control issues. They've used bacteriologicals on me again and again. My health is very severely compromised by their deranged attacks. But these things come from a timeline, a planning, a series of passages that they see as sort of a teaching plan that needs to be reconsidered by those who want to know the truth. Now, in the name of free speech in the 80s, they poisoned the tone of discussion while tampering with the neuroplasm that they had implanted to say that the enemy within was actually a mystical concept and that liberals had the enemy within them because they were Satanists. It's what you would expect from Hollywood theology. Counterfeiters is the origin of Hollywood. The great dictators is the origin of Hollywood. It traces back to the Nuncio in Fayoum. And at UW-Tacoma, you even find Clint Eastwood's book, Clint Eastwood's America, the book about Clint Eastwood, filed next to Sergei Eisenstein's Immoral Memories, which is relevant because Blythe Sanders and John Lennon worked together using doubles, body doubles, and trickery to make themselves appear to be victims when in reality they were planning the whole thing all along, from the days of Houdini. It's important to understand this about what they have done. So, we're dealing with a situation in Hollywood politics where there's accusations of upstarts upstaging the mighty. And if you're going to upstage the mighty, you're going to have to put yourself in the line of fire and danger and so on and so forth. There are many forgotten names. If there was a picture on the wall today, I remember when there were problems, somebody said one world, one London. They didn't say one world, one Malvinas. Our pinup cause isn't the child who is 13 years old, who's been buried under the rubble for 4 days and counting in Gaza due to the insane crimes of the Israeli traitors. The lessons of JFK speak to the idea that America is at risk. But America also asks for reassurance when it comes to our first principles of dignity, health care, concern for one another, and of course, our investment in the future of the children, both here and in the world around us. This has been savagely attacked at its roots and as an idea by the deranged maniacs in the Israeli government. Make no mistake, they mean to turn their laser beams on us too. They've made that perfectly clear. So, when you're busy forgetting names, it's okay if you decide you want to forget Biden, Eisenhower, JFK. Don't forget the children who suffered in Gaza. It's important also to understand that despite our rather trusting druthers, we mustn't make the mistake of the Italian anarchists who, when they defeated the tyranny of the precursors of Franco, relinquished the seats of spokesmanship in favor of the community, because that abdication created a void that was filled in the end by fascists. We have to shoulder some of our responsibilities. It's important for Robert Kennedy Jr. to understand he owes it to the United States of America to speak up for the victims of Gaza. He's not doing anybody a favor by helping the people who are destroying everything we stand for in Palestine. So, I know that hatred plays a huge role in what was done to me and how I suffer. I was a special project and continue to be a special project of Reagan's Axis Hollywood, Zionists working with Robert Fripp and King Crimson, tormentors from UW Dialectical. And they have ultimately come to fanatically brutal and hateful regime of power, running berserk and calling itself a special relationship with the United States of America. That special relationship is one of hostage taker, because believe me, they don't represent anything close to the best in America, not even close. Now, the issue of who has the power and can they do as they please comes up in a long dispute before Trumpy-Toon was identified going on at the University of Pittsburgh about what they call the nature of reality. It's a conversation of such deviance that I never imagined it could come to this. But even so, that's what it is. It's deviance, and it is coming to a terrible catastrophe. And they see it as a conversation with what they also see as the table talk variety of fascist wisdom. I don't understand how anybody could mistake it for anything but hatred and loathsomeness. Since we see what they are looking for is trouble, let's not be shy about naming their game. What they've done is worked out through Pope Carl and R.D. Lang, a twist in the intelligence system of contradictory hypocrisy that is made into a kind of alchemist's potion for energy. And they call this prog rock. It's absurd. The revolution number 9 has been clearly identified as the white page of the murders of Kennedy and King that is occupied by the Israeli traitor Gail Berson's Texas school book. There's nothing that we can say to argue for loyalty to Kennedy's assassins. However, we're being mal-depicted by the victims of his assassins as defending what he stood for. I think the idea of friendly fire killing Kennedy is a mistaken presumption. I think the idea that there was something insulting in comparing the public service of Donnie Chin to RFK in their martyrdom is as some sort of insult to Donnie Chin is a mistake. That's what I believe. I think that we need to invest more time in theme tracking this horrifying conversation that's being doled out by media. It's not a mistake in judgment to call attention to the fact that Wells Fargo overlooks the Seattle Federal Building. Wells Fargo was the focus of a takeover plan by Martin Edelman, who created the strange gyration that partnered the Zionist Myron, Ruth Hammer, Carmen Colucci, and Robert Fripp of King Crimson with Michael Todd that led to the looting of our museums by John Schulman that I have reported and testified about in the AIDS attack to Patty Murray's office. I think it's important to understand that my father was a school book martyr. I also think it's important for the NAACP to get off its high and mighty high horse. Sure, they have brawn, but where is your judgment? Everybody who was anything even remotely connected with ethical evaluation of racism was horrified to discover that there was a plan in South Africa to poison Nelson Mandela's brain, to bring him to drooling and embarrass the African National Congress. Even though it didn't happen, the idea of it is absolutely revolting. And this is the idea behind what was done to me and what was done to Mackenzie Shirilla. We're victims of a deranged attack. Victims. The NAACP needs to learn to be able to look at white people and say victim when they are victims, just as the United States of America needs to learn to look at Arab people and say victim when they are a victim.